Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With episode 810 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and it is Thursday, so you know what that means. We are here to break down everything that happened over the last week across NXT and AEW. But not only that, we have a loaded episode for you today because we will also be taking a brief second look at NXT Halloween Havoc from the weekend. We'll discuss a little Marigold because Io Sky was over there in Japan having a special match with Mayu Iwatani last week, and none other than multi-time WWE champion Lou Thesz, Hall of Fame inductee, and brand new author Natty Neidhart joins the show for the first time. Of course, you may have already watched that interview on our YouTube at Getting Overcast, but this is the audio debut of Natty Neidhart here on the podcast. You are not going to want to miss that. There are timestamps in the episode description today because we have so much content on the show. You're able to, of course, skip around here and there depending what you do and do not wish to listen to. But as always, I do hope you listen to the entire show front to back. And since I mentioned YouTube already, let's kick it off with a reminder that you can find Getting Over across social media at Getting Overcast. On Twitter and Blue Sky, we do episode drops, news, analysis, highlights. You can send in questions and comments for the show. You can vote in polls when we do those around premium live events and pay-per-views. And really, you can just interact with the Silver King and Vintage Chris Vanini on Blue Sky and Twitter at Getting Overcast. Same account on YouTube. You can listen to full-length audio episodes of the show and watch full-length video interviews like the one that you will hear today with Natty Neidhart. So wherever you want to find us, you can do it at Getting Overcast. Now, in terms of how today's show is being built and the order of operations for what performance-enhancing audio we will be delivering into your ear holes, this is how it's going to go. We're going to kick it off with your brief NXT Halloween Havoc second look. We're then going to break down the entire week in NXT. Silver King actually finally caught up on Evolve. So when I say we are going to do an extremely quick breakdown of the last, I want to say 3 months of Evolve, we're going to do that as well. Then we're going to break down everything that happened this week in AEW. And on the back end of the show, we will do our brief look at Io Sky and Marigold and then deliver our entire interview with Natty Neidhart. Like I said, there are timestamps in the episode description, so feel free to jump around. As always, though, we do hope you listen to the entire show. So with that said, let's kick things off with the NXT Halloween Havoc second look. Basically, whether you missed our instant analysis on Halloween Havoc, which is in our podcast feed, so really, you could pause right now and make sure you listen to that entire episode. We go in great detail about every single match on the card. But if you missed that, or if you just want some supplemental information from the show, Silver King watched it back, as I usually do, went ahead and wrote down some additional notes that I wanted to share with you. So NXT Championship Ricky Saints retained over Trick Williams. I gave this 3.25 stars and a B. This massively underdelivered. It was so ridiculously disappointing. Making matters worse, was it main eventing the show? It had no business being in that spot whatsoever, especially in retrospect, considering it wasn't the end of the feud, nor Trick's run in NXT. This was main eventing the men over the women, just to main event the men over the women, which we know happens on the main roster, and it happens in AEW, but it should not happen in NXT. The finish was really why this disappointed so much. They didn't get all of the Stun Dog Millionaire, and Ricky, who delivered it, sold it more than Trick, who took it. Williams is just on his feet, waiting to get countered into the spear, then the weak tornado DDT finisher. It looked like a mid-match sequence, not something that finishes a main event title match. As I said on the IA, it was like Williams reverted to his 2024 self during points of this match, and it left so much to be desired. Women's Championship, Tatum Paxley beat JC Jane to become the new NXT champion. I gave this 3.75 stars and a B+. I got multiple messages about my take on this match. I'm going to read one of them to you, which came via email from Scott F. Quote, Adam, I've listened to all 800 plus episodes of Getting Over. I agree with your takes 97% of the time. I've never disagreed with you more than how you reviewed Tatum and JC. I ask as a loyal listener that you watch the entire match without taking notes like you do and reevaluate your take. Hey now, Scott. So I was planning to rewatch this match in that way anyway, because that's what we do on the second look. But with such a respectful email, how could I decline? So that is, of course, exactly what I did. Here were my thoughts, first with something that had nothing to do with the match or its booking. You would think, considering how perfect the Fatal Influence entrance had been nailed with Jasmine Nix, that effort would have been put in to ensure that Lainey Reed could put her own spin on being the third wheel in the group. Instead, 2 shows in a row, this being the first, she had no idea what to do during their entrance, and neither did the cameraman. So not only is the group worse, but the entrance is way worse when that was tremendous. I mean, they absolutely crushed what they did with the entrance, pushing the cameraman away, the whole 9 yards, throwing Fallon Henley throwing her coat onto the first camera, and that whole thing's disappeared in addition to the interest level of the group. Anyway, getting to the match. It undoubtedly evoked emotion. It raised the temperature with twists and turns. If it had ended with the rolling encore and 450, maybe a cemetery drive chaser 90 seconds later, I believe my take on it would have been different. And I actually did appreciate, because this is a criticism I make all the time, that the match continued well beyond the rejection of the ringside extras. But, as I said on the instant analysis, sending everyone back down after they had already been ejected and doing the entire Izzy Dame spot with the belt, including the delayed reaction that was not explained or addressed, and then having Tatum effectively get her crowning moment via cheating from a heel, it all diminished what otherwise could have been a nearly perfect crowning moment. You want the underdog babyface to beat the big bad heel clean on her own. Upon further review, it was Culling that came back to the ring first, meaning they actively planned the cheating spot. It was not them responding to Fatal Influence coming down first and then trying to take advantage of it. So basically, in every way, Paxley's moment was diminished in kayfabe, even if that was not necessarily picked up on in reality from a lot of fans who were watching. For me, it's relatively easy to have booked all of this better. Now, all of that said, I do agree with some of you that the match overall was better than I might have suggested on the show, because I focused so much on the finish and not the bell-to-bell. Tatum looked great, wrestled in a way that proved she stood toe-to-toe with JC when they were alone, proved that she deserved to be champion. The finish was also a bit smoother than I thought watching it live, but I'm not changing my grade. It wasn't an A-level match, and it didn't have an A-level finish. So I'm at 3.75 stars B+, which is great. It still means it was extremely entertaining and well done, but Tatum winning the NXT title should have been an A match and moment. It really should have involved Lyra Valkyria. But even putting that aside, had they just done their booking here better and a little bit more logically, it would have been an A-, and the match would have been better because of it. It just didn't reach that level. And it's unfortunate because this moment with Tatum, we've wanted, many of us, for a long, long time. And it came, and we should be happy about that. And it was WWE listening to their audience. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But that doesn't mean it was automatically phenomenal or perfect or whatever the case might be, because it wasn't. And here on the show, we're always honest about our takes, regardless of where they come from. So let's go to the North American Championship. Zarya in for Sol Ruca defended. No, she lost the title to Blake Monroe, 3.5 stars and a B. As I said on the instant analysis, this match needed 4 to 5 more minutes. The finish came during what should have been the setup. The bit with Blake kicking out Sol's crutch, that was actually done well. But Zarya leaving the match like a doofus, and Sol seeing her leave the match, knowing her title is on the line, not immediately yelling at her, "Get back in the ring, I'm fine, get away from me." It was completely ridiculous and illogical that she didn't do that, especially when Zarya already cost herself the Battle Royal in similar fashion due to Blake a week prior or 2 weeks prior. So this woman did not learn any lesson. Sol, who saw this happen, didn't learn any lesson. This was poorly thought out. Even if you wanted to go with this style of finish, which was fine as a concept, again, it could have been executed so much better. Tag Team Championship, Dark State beat the Hardy Boys in a Broken Rules match. 3.5 stars and a B. I completely missed this live. Jeff Hardy was wearing Bray Wyatt homage face paint. Really nice touching, moment from him there. This was really chaotic. It was exactly what it needed to be in order to hide the Hardys' deficiencies and really the deficiencies of Osiris Griffin. So that's why it's a B. And I actually think the grade's a little bit generous, but I was extremely entertained by it. North American Championship, Ethan Page retained over El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. in a Dia de los Muertos match. I gave this 4.25 stars and an A, the match of the night. This was exceptional. You could have put this on a main roster PLE or Monday Night Raw episode with no build other than the video package that preceded it. The crowd would have gone crazy, not only due to the quality, but the heel-face dynamics that both guys executed to perfection. The face paint on Page was a great bonus. And then Javon Evans and Leon Slater beating La Parka and Mr. Iguana. Literally have no additional notes, 3 stars, B-, sticking with my grade. So no grade changes, no real perception changes. Yes, I do agree that JC and Tatum was a little bit better than I thought watching live, but not enough to make a major impact. And then in terms of an overall show grade, I gave it an 87, a B+. All of you came in your votes on social media with a 91, A-. I'm going to go up. I am. I'm going to go up to an 88 in case there's anyone out there who's like keeping track of the numerical grades. But 3 of the 6 matches being weak, including the main event, it is not enough for me to go into an A range or A- range, especially when that was my expectation coming in and this fell below my expectation. So I'm not going to say, well, it met my expectation. No, it didn't even come close to that, really. So 88 for me is actually pretty generous, and I ticked it up 1 point because I felt better about the JC and Tatum match on second watch, but like I said, not good enough to change the grade of the match. Next up for NXT is Deadline, which is set for Saturday, December 6th in San Antonio, and I say that because I was putting it on my calendar, and I'm absolutely infuriated by the placement of this match. This is the day of conference championship games for college football. And Selection Sunday equivalent for the college football playoff is the next day. And they're deciding to do it on this day in San Antonio. I thought at first, I was like, oh, I wonder where the Big 12 championship is being played because WWE's kind of has that deal with them. Maybe they're going to do it in the same location. But no, that game is played in Arlington outside of Dallas. And San Antonio is 5 hours away. Now, if they had done this in a Dallas area venue, because that Big 12 championship game is at 11 a.m. Eastern, I believe. If they had done that, I would have said, oh shit, that actually makes sense. They're going to try to cross promote and get people from the Big 12 championship to go to the NXT show and do both in the same day. But yeah, it's 5 hours away in San Antonio. So I don't understand that. I also do not understand WWE announcing events with 4 to 5 weeks of notice. Like, why are you not trying to sell tickets months out and build anticipation for a card? You're actively hurting yourself when you give people brief periods of time, especially around holidays, to make plans and put themselves in a certain position. What if I was a huge NXT fan and I really wanted to go to Deadline because it's my favorite PLE of the year? And by the way, it may be the best PLE that NXT has every year just because of that Iron Survivor match stipulation. It's super fun. So what if I was planning to go to this, but now you gave me 4 weeks notice and it's halfway across the country, plane tickets are more expensive, and now I'm not going to make it? I don't understand what WWE is doing here. They really got to figure this shit out for 2026. So that was the second look at NXT Halloween Havoc. We're going to transition into a full breakdown of NXT. But before we get to that, the Silver King does need to remind you that here at Getting Over,
it's all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. And while I'm at it, please remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well. For $5 a month, $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. We give you extra content. It's for very little money, and your money is not really going toward the content. It's going to supporting the continuation of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. And you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. All right, let's get into breaking down the week in NXT. Tatum Paxley got an incredible ovation entering with the calling. Tatum celebrated with the fans, saying Halloween Havoc was the best night of her life. It's what she dreamt of accomplishing since joining NXT. She said she will never forget all the heartache she experienced on her way to the title, and therefore, she wants to ensure everyone gets the opportunities they deserve. Izzy Dame cut her off, trying to caution about being overzealous, saying challengers need to earn their opportunities just like she did. Tatum brushed her off, saying she had a better idea. She heard fans were upset with the wheel not being used at Halloween Havoc, so she brought it back with a twist. The wheel would choose her opponents. Paxley was incredibly excited about this, only for Sean Spears to point out Izzy's name was not on the wheel. Tatum said she would never want the title to come between them, and Izzy agreed. But Paxley spun it, and it landed on Lola Vice. Dame had to put on a fake smile, clearly disagreeing with the move to a significant degree. I'd have loved this segment if NXT did not completely spoil it on social media before the show. There was an NXT Anonymous segment that was posted hours before NXT went on the air, where Javon Evans told Leon Slater through FaceTime that NXT was going to be crazy, and among the reasons that he said it was going to be crazy is that Tatum spun the wheel and it landed on Lola. Talk about completely ruining kayfabe. A completely moronic mistake by WWE. An absolutely moronic mistake by WWE to post the video ruining a supposedly impromptu live moment with the wheel. What the hell are you guys doing over there? I mean,
what is going on?
If I put that aside, and how do I put that aside? But if I do, Tatum's promo was fantastic. The crowd support is super real. The back and forth between her and Izzy felt legitimate. Dame is actually pretty decent as an actress. And the wheel concept was damn smart coming out of Halloween Havoc, because Paxley is the exact type of crazy where she would think that's a good idea. So the concept was on point here. I loved that they used the wheel in this way.
Thank you!
Especially after I criticized it not being part of Halloween Havoc. The execution was flawed, though. And I did wish that some type of acknowledgement was made about Izzy's involvement in the end of the match. Instead, they entirely glossed it over. They didn't even have Tatum say, Izzy, it was so great for you to be in the ring with me and get my back with JC. I knew you had my back this entire time. No, they just forgot that Dame got in the ring, held the title up, and it looked like she was going to hit Paxley with it. So it made for another NXT segment, and we've been saying this for like a month now, that was less successful than it could have been if they just took time to think everything through. Lola later found Tatum backstage offering sincere congratulations. Vice was excited to have a fair chance at the title, but promised to knock her out and win the strap. Paxley said she worked her ass off for the championship. She won't be giving it up that easily. Lola does this weird thing where she tries to mix English and Spanish, so Spanglish, which is fine in theory, but the only word she actually says in Spanish usually is but, so pero. For example, Lola Vice is improving as a wrestler. Pero, she still has work to do as a promo. It really stuck out to me in the segment because she did it like 3 times. I did like the whole concept for Paxley of, don't mistake my kindness for weakness. That was needed after the opening segment where she did look like a pushover to a degree. So we had the NXT Women's Championship, Paxley defending against Vice. A few minutes into the match, Fatal Influence was shown storming through the NXT parking lot. They walked down the ramp, destroyed Izzy ringside, distracting Tatum. Lola chose not to take advantage of this, but rather went back-to-back with the champion, leading to a 3-on-2 attack and a no-contest finish. Vice got run into the ring post with Paxley eating rolling encore after a beatdown. Real deflating segment coming out of the larger deal with Tatum and Izzy. Didn't deliver on the wheel, and now I guess we're supposed to forget about that existing in the future, despite there being a ton of names on it. Why even bother with this? They could have had Lola come out to the ring to challenge and Influence to attack just the same. While Tatum's promo was on point earlier, and it was nice that she had that moment, this was not a strong follow. This repetitiveness wasn't dissimilar from the top of the men's card either, considering that feud similarly continued. We'll get to that in a few minutes. I do want to say, though, because I didn't on the instant analysis, and I didn't even earlier when I did the second look, this was a paradigm of WWE listening to its fans and delivering something they actively demanded. I'm talking about Tatum winning the championship. Don't forget, it wasn't that long ago that like Jada Parker straight up called her a loser and then demolished her in a match, basically proving she was a loser, and we ripped them to shreds over that. Then Tatum got moved to the culling, and it felt like she was dead in the water, but Shawn Michaels and NXT booking, they delivered. So even if it's not precisely how it should have been, with more Lyra Valkyria involvement and such, Tatum ultimately got what she deserved, and the fans are happy. And that should be one of two goals when it comes to booking wrestling. One, make money, and two, make your fans happy. And in this case, it looks like NXT has done both. Blake Monroe got a Maybelline-sponsored bathtub celebration with the North American Championship, bragging about not just winning the title, but smashing Sol Ruka's dream and the Zaruka relationship. Monroe said, "Hell is never too far behind when you chase the glamour." Blake decided her first title defense would come in New York at Gold Rush, the only stage appropriate for someone like her. She said nothing is brighter and darker than she is. Pretty good. Would have preferred to see her live kind of crowing about this, but you need to give superstars their own personas, and there's really not too many in NXT these days getting unique segments like this when you consider the Barbershop, the Chase U Classroom, D'Angelo Family Restaurant. All those other sites are defunct. So Blake in a bathtub? Sure, why not?
That's the most action I've had all year.
Blake's promo game is improving. She's speeding up her speech. That's definitely helping. So let's keep giving her these opportunities. Zaruka backstage learned from Ava that Sol is making a lot of progress in her recovery, though she should not be rushing her return. Is that not a HIPAA violation to give medical information to the general manager as opposed to the patient? So she was asked what she wanted to do with the speed title, Sol was. She decided not to have Zarya defend it, instead relinquishing it so it could have a fighting champion. Zarya was obviously pissed off about this, hurt, leaving the area as she assumed Sol didn't trust her ability. This was an idiotic segment. NXT runs one speed match per week, right? Sol is making quick progress in her recovery, right? Why not run the tournament and then have her decide at the end, because then she's either cleared to defend the title or the would-be semifinal becomes a title match. The number one contendership, becomes a title match. Similarly stupid was the idea that Ruka would not trust Zarya when clearly it was Ruka being ringside, Monroe using that to her advantage, that stood as the reason the title was lost in the first place. It's not like Zarya lost clean. I know we're supposed to suspend disbelief in wrestling, but this was super illogical in both phases. Sol later expressed anger over Blake holding her title. Zarya decided she would enter the speed tournament to win back the title Ruka gave up. JC then told them to shut up, and they just listened to her and walked away. That's weak-ass babyface shit, man, especially when Zarya could eat all of Fatal Influence in one meal. Anyway, Jane said she was sick of being overlooked. The expected 6-woman match was announced for next week. Weird construction here. Why would you make Zaruka look like losers for no reason whatsoever? NXT opened with Trick Williams ranting in the control room, through the backstage area, out in the loading dock, and into the WWE Performance Center about running the brand for 3 years and not putting up with crap. Trick claimed he beat Ricky Saints like a bum, demanded one more NXT championship match. Ava came out saying she's willing to have an adult conversation about it, despite there not having been any controversy about the loss, but she wasn't going to take the rantings of a child. Williams ran down his factually impressive resume, only for Saints to storm out, leading to a pull-apart brawl and a quick cutaway to air WWE Speed promo packages. If you're the director, why the hell are you immediately shifting away from your top dogs fighting to taped crap promos for WWE Speed? That is so ridiculously stupid. Williams continued on a backstage rampage later, bumping into Out the Mud, trying to find out Saints' location. Then he hit Miles Bourne in the back with a chair following a match that we'll talk about in a little bit, leading to Ricky attacking out of the crowd for a second brawl, also immediately cut off by the director. Heaven forbid we see these guys fight. Trick's initial promo was on point, better than he delivered at any point in this feud, though it was also the first time he actually had some unique content to utilize. We know as viewers that he's going to get another match because Ava is a complete pushover. My hope was there would be some type of unique booking or stipulation. Maybe My Loser Leaves Town would finally come to fruition. But the stupid shit with cutting away from the brawls, that really annoyed me. Why would you not show it until they finally get pulled apart at least? We'll come back to this in a moment. TNA Knockouts Championship, Kalani Jordan defending against Jordan Grace. This main evented the show. I believe Lonnie was wearing TNA colors. Not sure if that was intentional. Nice touch if so. Lonnie pulled a Charlotte Flair, completely missing a ringside springboard moonsault. Grace did a great catch spinebuster, sold well after being hit with a flying kick. Lonnie came back with a handspring stunner with a split. Grace came back with World's Strongest Slam, but the knee Lonnie worked gave out as she tried a corner bomb of some kind. Grace rolled through a jackknife cover for a jackknife-ish powerbomb. Lonnie then took Grace off the top with a avalanche Spanish fly, only for Trick and Ricky's brawl to continue ringside with Williams throwing Saints through the barricade. Lonnie grabbed the TNA title amid the commotion to cheat, but she decided, no, I'm a good girl, I'm not going to use it. She put it down in the corner. Grace caught her with a German suplex bridge for a delayed false finish. The guys then brawled into the ring. So Lonnie grabbed the title, smashed Grace in the face, and retained the strap. This was an extremely similar finish that we got at Halloween Havoc with Tatum and JC, except it was executed smoothly with much more intensity and overall logic. It was a necessary escape win for Lonnie, considering she just won the title, and hopefully this is the start of a full, legitimate heel turn for her, where she's no longer playing the middle ground and actually gets to be a piece of shit without trying to believe otherwise. Whether that will work remains to be seen, but it's way overdue compared to the tweener crap that she's been doing that has largely failed to this point. This was the best match on the show by margin, even if there were a couple hiccups. Lonnie's belt shot was snug as hell. I say this without exaggeration. It's one of the best I can remember anywhere. It looked real. That's always the goal with the belt shot. Way better than the crap John Cena was doing, what Cody Rhodes did a couple weeks ago. Like, Kalani Jordan knows how to deliver a belt shot, believe it or not. Grace is always great bell to bell. They worked awesomely together. Even with the finishing sequence getting interrupted a bit, 3.75 stars B+. It may be time to send Grace to SmackDown, unless the plan is for her to beat Monroe for the North American title. But at this point, she just never wins anything important and does not need to be there. There's more than enough supremely talented women to fill both levels of the division on NXT. You don't need Jordynne Grace anymore. And if she's only going to be there to lose, then why actually is she there? Could you imagine if Grace, Henley, Jane, and Lash Legend all showed up together on the main roster on SmackDown? Talk about completely revitalizing a women's division in one fell swoop. That's what the Silver King would do if he had the pencil and actually decided the contracts of all these people. Trick and Ricky continued brawling after the bell, with Saints getting retribution from the barricade spot by spearing Williams through the base of the crow's nest. Both spots are heavily overused in NXT these days, even if the latter one always looks kind of good. As Ricky emerged from the wreckage, Ava appeared and booked a last man standing match in 2 weeks. That only led to a continuing brawl as the show went off the air. I swear to you, I am at my wit's end with last man standing matches in WWE. This is the 6th last man standing match in 11 months of 2025. Second inside of a month. There are other stipulations existing, folks. Tons of other stipulations. Falls Count Anywhere, for one. To be fair, NXT did run Falls Count Anywhere in July. But why not a steel cage or a cell style match? Or why not a new stipulation where you can win via pinfall submission or 10 count? How about that? Then it at least is a different style. Beyond the stipulation, though, is the timing. You literally have a double episode called NXT Gold Rush in the theater at Madison Square Garden in 3 weeks. The entire gimmick being that tons of titles will be on the line during this show. Why are you running this title match for your main championship in the men's division in 2 weeks at the WWE Performance Center? I am really not sure what's going on with some of the NXT decision-making of late, but that feels like a missed layup. Okay, aside from the stipulation and aside from the planning, this was indeed a hot brawl. Annoying that they took up so many segments of the show, but there was an intensity here that simply did not exist in the lead-up to their initial fight, which really speaks to what I said on the Halloween Havoc instant analysis, and again at the second look, about this being the most disappointing bout on that card, but it was perhaps the start of what they're doing, which is why it should not have main evented the show. This is the proof of that. But while sometimes it's okay to start a storyline or develop something on a PLE, generally, that's where you should be concluding either chapters or books. This had no business being last on that show if it was not their final match together, especially considering what happened with Tatum. So all this did, like I said, it confirmed my takes about that show from Saturday. The NXT Anonymous segment I mentioned aired after this match. Evans and Slater spoke about stepping up for the tag team titles when Dark State came through trying to bully Javon 4-on-1. They said beating La Parka and Mr. Iguana doesn't make them ready for the crew that beat the Goats. Saquon Sugars then stepped up to Javon, saying neither he nor they strike any fear in their hearts. He seemed to make a singles challenge for next week, I believe. And if so, hell yeah, if we're getting Javon versus Saquon. That's been a long time coming since both joined NXT.
I like it. I like it a lot.
The Evolve Women's Championship was also on the line on the show. Kendall Gray defending against Lash Legend. There was a chaotic backstage segment between Gray and Ren Sinclair, with the latter checking with the champion to see whether she was actually cool with doing the match in the first place. When Sinclair brought up Ren QCC, Kendall didn't have time to talk about it, but she ensured that Ren would join her ringside, which of course popped the new friend. Lash straight up dominated at the opening bell. Gray escaped a chokeslam, landing a rebound German suplex. Then she countered Legend on the apron, bouncing in a handstand off the ropes for a ringside DDT. Lash caught her flying for a hang-up in the top rope, but Kendall avoided a big boot in the corner, hitting Shades of Gray for the upset win and title retention. I figured we would see Jada Parker here to cost Legend somehow, excuse the loss. Instead, this was an establishment victory for Gray, which is even more reason it should have gone to Sinclair, considering Kendall was already a champion. This is the type of win you give to someone when the loser is about to leave the territory, because otherwise, there's really no coming back from this for Lash. Maybe she's the SmackDown move that I had been hoping would be JC or Fallon. Hell, like I said, maybe it's all three of them. Kendall looked good here. She has a bright future, needs better ring gear for sure, but she's the entire package otherwise. She wrestles extremely well, emotes, bumps her ass off. The improvement that she has made since being taken off NXT TV, because they introduced her like 2 years ago. They took her off TV, actually allowed her to develop, had her work on Evolve and develop more. And now you look at Kendall Gray and you say, oh yeah, that's not a throwaway wrestler. That's a future WWE superstar. This was a solid match bell to bell, both of them doing what they do best. Kendall threw up the NQCC hand gesture after the bell, which thrilled Ren, presumably means that she accepted a role in the group. That's good news considering both of them deserve more screen time. But really, it's Sinclair who needs to get featured sooner than later because she's been in the background for far too long. She's a great promo, a great character actress, and a great wrestler. Why isn't she in the ring? Kendall and Ren, by the way, should both be in the Iron Survivor Challenge. By the way, there were 3 top-of-the-card women's championship matches on NXT this Tuesday, which is incredible on one hand, but ridiculous on the other hand, as again, it spoke to what I've been talking about for weeks now, too many brands being shoved into 2 hours of NXT TV. It wasn't that painful in this case because all 6 women who competed were actually NXT WWE talents. But still, this is starting to move into AEW territory with endless titles that just compound atop one another to suddenly stand out less than they did before. Chelsea Green and Ethan Page were putting each other over backstage, previewing their AAA mixed tag team title match. Alba Fire had security all set when Thea Hale walked by singing Joe Hendry, leading to him popping out of a trash can like Oscar the Grouch. He still had a TNA bottom third tag, which feels incongruent to how he is working right now. Didn't say much. Thea wheeled him away afterward. Chelsea and Ethan, they're incredible together. Paige should immediately link with her on the main roster whenever he gets called up. Platonic asshole comedy heels. It's a lot of fun together. I could see Paige Hendry happening after this. Would be a solid feud for Ethan. This was the best Hendry gag since he started doing the regular pop-up stuff in NXT. And it was nice that Hale actually got on the show. Now it's time to actually use her. There were some smart teases in this segment before the reveal. I could see them doing a mixed tag team match, and then maybe we get Hendry and Paige on the back end. Let's hope that's the direction it goes. Miles Bourne fought Tavian Heights. Bourne, in a social media promo, said Heights would always be his brother, win or lose in the match. Heights said the match was not his intention in the first place, but he doesn't like Bourne taking credit for his NQCC exit. A lot of pin counters early. Josh Briggs jumped on commentary with Booker T all over him, talking about dude being a veteran while the other guys are rookies. Pretty close. Briggs got into it with Heights, which led to Bourne splashing both of them ringside. Tavian avoided the zigzag-style finisher, but he lost a counter sequence to Miles, who rolled through a headlock into a leg lock pinning combination for the win. This is the type of match finish The main roster needs to use more. Nothing was lost by Heights here, despite him getting defeated. You don't think any less of him afterward. Briggs pulled Heights out of the ring after the bell. Both of them brawled to the back, and then Trick, as I mentioned earlier, hit Miles in the back with a chair to try to take over the show again. I'm interested in this being a three-way feud with Briggs, Heights, and Bourne. Not sure where it's going, but it is something for all of them to do. And lastly, Jasper Troy beat Axiom in a WWE speed match. Troy hit a pull-up World's Strongest Slam and Black Hole Slam in succession, winning in 2 minutes and 55 seconds. It was here I realized the rattling chains you hear during his entrance are not the ones he carries on his body. They've integrated them into the theme. It's messing with me to the point I believe it's the worst theme in WWE, which is really saying something when you're talking about Def Rebel. I'll repeat, WWE Speed should not be on NXT. It actively makes the show worse, and using it as the opening match Tuesday was pure insanity. You are not actively capturing audience that way. Your first match needs to be something that people say, oh, I want to stay tuned into this show. Jasper Troy and Axiom in a 3-minute speed match is not it. Yes, I've acknowledged visually speed works in the WWE Performance Center. That's fine. You want to put it on Evolve. You want to do a social media show, try to sell that like they did before. Okay, fine. Do not put it on NXT. This is ridiculous. So overall, a super entertaining and enjoyable NXT, despite the issues I mentioned. Much better top to bottom than the prior weeks. The women again completely dominated the show. Spoiling the result of the spin the wheel segment was a massive, easily avoidable failure. The repetition of the top feuds in the men's and women's division were annoying to a degree when one hopes for fresh content coming out of a PLE. Both heels, Trick and JC, were basically just crybabies. At least Jane had a legitimate complaint because she did get screwed by Dame. Perhaps most frustrating in that regard was Tatum not getting a legitimate first title match, despite doing a huge segment promoting her first title match. Like I said, something about NXT Creative is just a bit off these days. It's almost like when a TV show changes showrunners and suddenly there's lacking congruence from one week to the next or one season to the next. If WWE gave me, or someone in a similar role, this show script with 90 minutes to just check for continuity and logic gaps, you'd be looking at a solid A episode of TV. But they don't have someone doing that, seemingly, and therefore, mistakes keep getting made. It was still strong despite those issues. NXT does need to figure out what it wants to be after Gold Rush going into 2026. I said this on the instant analysis, and of course, I've said it previously as well. So let's move over to Evolve. I got caught up with Evolve from July to present day. Frankly, I don't have that much to say about it. What needs to be known is WWE basically refreshed most of its ID program. So many of the people we had watched, or many of you not watched, I guess, are no longer even in the company. I have 5 quick bullet points here from Evolve. Again, 3 months of shows. I had been high on Jin Tala coming out of LFG, thinking she had a great look, a lot of potential with her personality to make it. And that is still possible. I hear she's doing independent wrestling. That's cool. But it was clear during some of these Evolve matches, she just was not developing at the pace of others. There was a cool finish in a Kendall Gray Wendy Chu match where Kendall flipped over a submission but passed out as she simultaneously got the 3 count. I would love to see that in a more notable match with superstars who could really sell it. They followed a couple weeks later with a legitimately great I Quit match where, if I'm being honest, the quitting sequence was far better and more dramatic than the Darby Allin Jon Moxley match. Again, I'm just talking about that sequence. A couple weeks ago, Evolve held a takeover equivalent show called Succession, which featured both titles on the line in story-driven matches. The show was at the WWE PC instead of the supplemental warehouse wherever Evolve tapes. The men's championship had Jackson Drake defend against Bryce Donovan, who was his bodyguard in the Vanity Project, for lack of a better term. Drake retained with a 3.25-star B match. These guys in Swipe Right, they've shown a lot of promise together and apart. And then we had the women's championship. Callie Armstrong came in as the champion. She defended against Kendall Gray in an absolute frickin' banger main event. Easily the best match in the 33-show history of this version of Evolve. The intensity was top-notch. Callie caught Kendall with a catch power slam off the ropes, only for Kendall to counter Callie connection, a 4-rope run shoulder tackle, which is her finisher. And she countered it with a Randy Orton-esque power slam. And that's how they finished the match and she won the title. Phenomenal finish. Tremendous match between a pair of relative neophytes, both of them with less than 2 years of wrestling experience. 4 stars A-. Seriously, That's how good this match was. Let's move over to AEW, where we had a relatively normal week in terms of match relevancy. 8 of 11, 73% had storyline relevance. And the reason why this basically reached the threshold in 73 is basically 75 for me. So yes, it hit the threshold. Congratulations to them. No question about it. The reason why this happened is because last week, 2 matches that in the past would have been just completely random, thrown on the show, whatever, were given 30 to 60 second backstage setups. And that's the difference between 6 of 11 and 8 of 11. And even though neither of those matches was compelling in any real way, they were at least relevant to things that were happening. They didn't start randomly with storylines developing on the back end. So a mini clap and kudos to AEW for the storyline relevance. Let's get into everything that happened across Dynamite and Collision. Hangman Page, who did not show up on the main show Wednesday live after the pay-per-view, mind you, opened Collision, which was taped in the same venue at the same time, which was viewed by 200,000 people last Saturday. He screamed from the onset of his promo, recounting how they partnered, he and the Ops, to take down Death Riders before he generously gave Samoa Joe a title shot. Page's contention was that he embarrassed Joe by beating him, hence the heel turn. Hangman said now he's hunting Joe, not the other way around, and he's not just going to beat him, he's going to ruin his entire life. Let's see if he pays off that promise. Fine speech from Page. Not really a huge fan of promo guys who go from 60 to 0 as opposed to 0 to 60. He's like the antithesis of Ricky Saints in that regard. AEW is not really doing Page any favors with a second-rate, obvious feud where there's no legitimate thought of him losing the title. On Collision, Hook beat Griff Garrison. Why? No reason to any benefit? Of course not. Well, I guess there was a bit of a reason, because on Dynamite, Hook strode backstage in a D12 shirt. Shout out for the D12 shirt, by the way. Mumbling about having his hands full in a 4-way match, which I learned in this moment was for a number 1 contendership to the AEW Championship. Then he said he would do his best to ensure Joe didn't advance because he showed the world he's an asshole, but Hook already knew that. I guess Hook forgot when he went up to Joe and they decided to let bygones be bygones a few weeks ago that this guy was an asshole who couldn't be trusted, right? Okay, beyond that, excuse me for a second, but in what effing world is Hook deserving of a number 1 contendership shot for the main AEW title? He wrestled 1 singles match since March. The last opponents he's beaten in singles were Garrison Saturday on Collision just to do it, and Max Caster in 44 seconds. If you want to expand it further, he beat Christian Cage via disqualification and Nick Wayne 11 months ago. He's never held a singles title in AEW other than the FTW Championship. So again, in what effing world does this guy deserve to be in a number 1 contendership match? This is dog shit, nonsensical booking. On Dynamite, the 4-way included not only Hook, but Samoa Joe, who just lost the title match clean at WrestleDream, along with Bobby Lashley and Ricochet. I didn't mind the latter 2 being involved, particularly Lashley. I could have made a case for others being in this spot. The real outlier was Hook, and the real issue was that the winner was immensely predictable, considering none of the other 3 had been in a single segment with Hangman. Ricochet did a trio of high risks, ending with a shooting star press on Hook. Joe broke Red Rum with a running senton. He went to hit Hook with a muscle buster, but he had to hold it for 30 seconds because Lashley was late running the ropes for his spear. Ricochet then broke the cover with, I believe, a 450. Lashley no-sold a chair shot from Ricochet, started chasing him, only to double back as Joe was submitting Hook in the Coquina clutch. He was too early here, and he had to hold up Lashley on the apron, which looked rough, though the referee did do a good job making it work. Ricochet was obviously the MVP of the match. I saw people going wild about his work here, but it was no different than what he's done during the last year in AEW and even previously in WWE. Maybe a move or 2 extra, but it's the same guy in the same role he was in before. Yes, he's getting more TV time. He's getting more opportunity to do character work. There's no question about that. But the positioning of him is identical. He's a mid-carder who pretty much loses every big match unless it's in a tournament format. And even when he's on a pay-per-view, he's losing. And the only reason he's on so many pay-per-views is because AEW has 11 and 12 match cards. A lot of those matches he's involved in, the Hurt Syndicate shit with Demand, should probably be TV matches. For some odd reason, after this match, Tony Schiavone came out to do a contract signing with the Fright Night staffers. This was called Fright Night Dynamite. There were a few people dressed in ridiculous head-to-toe costumes. They came to the ring for no reason, so the Ops beat them up. One guy was revealed to be a jobber, as Excalibur explained. Hangman previously dressed up during a prior episode in the past and attacked someone. I didn't recall it until he said it, but it did kind of come back to me a little bit. Joe then signed the contract, and they just stood around. They're standing there, dead air. So Joe grabs a mic, saying he should relieve Page of the burden of being champion. Then they stood around again as Shivani announced the match. Hey, the match is official. It's going to happen. Sponsored by DC. Then he suggested a toast for Joe being number one contender, cheering to All Elite Wrestling. Where the best wrestle.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Full gear and forever champion Hangman Page, or Hangman Page champion, long may he live, something like that. And then Page revealed himself as Shivani, dressed like Shivani. He had a Phantom of the Opera mask on, took out the Ops, hit Buckshot Lariat on Joe to end the show. I went from rolling my eyes, thinking this was the stupidest end to Dynamite yet, second stupidest to the thing that happened with, I forgot the name, the Goon Squad run by Evil Uno. Dark Order at the end of the first year of AEW's existence, I want to say, 2019 going into 2020 maybe. But I went from rolling my eyes, thinking this was stupid, to not only being relieved, but legitimately entertained by Paige dressed up as Shivani, fat suit and all. This was done extremely well. Tony voiced over the final part, then Hangman took the last line, surprising the guys. The only problem there is that the announcer was in cahoots with the babyface when the announcer should be unbiased. It would have played better if the Ops had embarrassed Shivani earlier in the show somehow. Backstage, pushed him around, pissed him off. You see it on Tony's face. And then he would have reason to want retribution, and it would make sense for him to side with Page and get one up on them. It's the little things that take segments from good to great, acceptable to logical. There was a messiness to the execution of this overall, but like I said, it was extremely entertaining as an end to the show, the final part of it, and probably the most interesting thing Page has done individually in a long time. Unlike the last time he dressed up that I largely forgot, this one was memorable. It also added some needed intensity to their rematch, considering we all know it's going to go the same way as the first meeting with Hangman retaining the title. On Collision, Pac beat Tomohiro Ishii. The new look that Pac is rocking is horrendous. The hair and the gear are both terrible individually and together. And this is not a case of change is bad. He actively made himself more generic looking. Death Riders had to cheat for Pac to beat a guy who always loses in AEW. This accomplished nothing. On Dynamite, Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy beat Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta in a trick or treat tornado tag team match. Solid enough match. Yuta took Eat Defeat before Orange hit a tope suicida on Garcia through a leaning table ringside. Yuta then tapped out to Scorpion Deathlock with more of a struggle, by the way, than Jon Moxley gave at Wrestle Dream. No Death Riders attack after the bell, which didn't make sense because they would have the numbers advantage. They all have each other's backs, except when it comes to Garcia and Yuta, I suppose. Meanwhile, Garcia went from jobbing as a face with a sob story to jobbing as a heel who is the least featured guy in his own faction. On Dynamite, Moxley and Kyle O'Reilly rematched, but it ended in a double countout as O'Reilly had Mox locked in a guillotine ringside. I could have sworn that AEW rules were a 20 count, not 10. Maybe it's for title matches or something. The referee was screaming it in their faces, but O'Reilly just never let go. Marina Shafir then came in, slugged Aubrey Edwards after the bell. Is she going to face a fine for that? Is there going to be any suspension for literally knocking out a referee? Well, there wasn't on this episode. We'll find out Saturday and next Wednesday. I bet there's not. So Claudio Castagnoli then knocks out O'Reilly with a European uppercut. Roderick Strong saved with Yuta and Garcia stomping him out. Then Darby, Orange, and Mark Briscoe saved. Where the hell were these guys when Darby needed help for 2 months straight, feuding with Mox, getting the shit kicked out of him? Darby grabbed a mic saying he wanted to give Mox a chance to suffer as much as he deserves. Briscoe said the heels were fake-ass tough guys who run away when times get tough. Then Cassidy refused to take the mic, only to get it shoved into his chest. If you're Samoa Joe and you do that, he's going to hit you over the head with it. But apparently Orange is a bitch. So he rolled his eyes, Orange did, shook his head, he sighed and goes, blood and guts. And the segment ended. The match was fine. The post-match left a lot to be desired. Yes, I understand Orange's gimmick. Yes, I genuinely like Orange's gimmick. But this is not how you announce a match like this, especially when you have a guy in the ring, Briscoe, who is a maniac who could have gotten on the top rope, said it, barked, done the whole 9 yards. Can you imagine if William Regal walked out, sighed, and goes, well, I guess you guys can figure it out in War Games. Of course not. You need War Games! You send the crowd into a frenzy on the back end of the announcement. They tried to be cute here, and it cost them a reaction. Speaking of blood and guts, do you guys remember when the women's match was announced in that really odd segment and then never referenced again? I had to look it up. That happened more than 4 weeks ago on September 27th. The show is in 2 weeks. There's no teams. There's not been a single segment on TV or pay-per-view that has progressed that match story. Complicating matters, surely, is the women's tag team tournament now happening at the same time as the build to the show, when really they should have delivered blood and guts and then done the tournament afterwards as a result of partnerships that were forged through the match. I remember criticizing one of the women's War Games builds for WWE last year, maybe it was the year before, but at least it was built through a month-long storyline with legitimate reasoning for why it happened, even if it was weak. They've been running these random women against one another for 6 months now, and they still didn't build a storyline to blood and guts. They probably will do a brawl or something on Collision, or maybe next week on Dynamite or something like that. But this just goes to prove again, the women are not at all a priority for AEW. They never have been, and at this rate, it seems like they're never going to be. On Collision, Jet Speed and Jurassic Express beat FTR and the Young Bucks in a $400,000 money match. Folks, the Getting Over research team did the math. Tony Khan has now spent $3,915,000 unnecessarily in kayfabe, in addition to all his talent salaries in 2025 alone. He could have booked this match on his own whims because all these dudes are under contract. Let's put fake money on the line. The guy's paid out $4 million this year in fake money. To what end? This was obviously the match of the night, and it did have build, terrible build from the prior Dynamite. The heels did a nice 4-way set of high risks for Jeff Speed double pinned FTR. I hoped there was reason for that specific finish, because otherwise it unnecessarily made FTR look like shit getting double pinned by the weakest team in the entire match. On Dynamite, Don Callis backstage brought the Bucks over, again opening the door to his family, considering they have so many forces aligned against them right now. Callis then proved this by getting the production guys to run their actual entrance as he did a huge announce from backstage, putting them over as the greatest tag team of the millennium and beyond. They seemed to love it, and then they even got a shitload of pyro, like Cody Rhodes level, just to boot. This was the best usage of the Bucks entrance gag and Callis at all in a long, long time. I enjoyed this immensely. This preceded a 4-way match involving the same teams in the money match, which was deemed a number 1 contendership, even though 2 of the 4 teams lost. Shouldn't this match have been Jet Speed against Jurassic Express? Now, at least all 4 of these teams were actually deserving of being in a number 1 contendership, unlike what they did with the men's singles title. FTR, which again lost the tornado match by getting double pinned, won the number 1 contendership in what was the AEW match of the night, maybe the week, from an entertainment perspective. This was not a tornado stipulation when it absolutely should have been, despite there being no tagging for the vast majority of the match. Commentary didn't even bother following, like, who is legal. There's a tag. Dax Harwood is legal. Didn't even bother doing it for us watching at home. Luchasaurus chokeslammed Nick onto Matt, so Nick literally just stood up and then ate a jump-off Canadian Destroyer from Jack Perry. Jack completely botched a tope suicida before getting drop-kicked off Speedball's shoulders from the apron into the 4 heels ringside in almost a doomsday device deal. That was the best spot by far. Kevin Knight basically missed a UFO only to eat Shatter Machine for the FTR win. The positive takeaway from this match, it finally feels like the AEW tag team division is healing itself after 2 years of total garbage. FTR as heels makes a lot more sense contending against Rodito. However, going back to Collision, the Bucks should have been the one to lose that match. It would have made sense, their depressed state being in the segment with Callis. It would have made sense with FTR winning here in a number 1 contendership. Instead, they had FTR get double pinned for no reason whatsoever. On Dynamite, there was a Callis family summit to discuss problems between Kazuchika Okada and Konosuke Takeshita, the latter of whom was not there due to travel issues apparently. They unveiled the 7th or 8th or 10th Callis painting, or again, whatever number. Then we saw a waste of time video package. Kyle Fletcher then read some kind of pledge before Takeshita showed up. Callis told Takeshita he's the alpha, but the whole family is made of alphas. He's got to appreciate that. Then he asked Takeshita to put his ego aside and shake Okada's hand out of respect to strengthen the family. Takeshita did extend his hand, but Okada lifted his and flicked him off. Callis decided clearly a handshake isn't the way to go. Instead, he was going to have them team up on Collision to prove they can work together like a family. What I realized at the end of this segment is that Callis now may be what Chris Jericho becomes in 5 years. Hopefully, if he goes back to WWE or stays with AEW, they figure out a way to not make it all about Jericho like it's generally all about Callis. That said, this was probably my favorite Callis-led segment in months, a year. He did a great job storytelling with both guys in the ring together. The tension between Okada and Takeshita doesn't feel manufactured like it has been so often in Okada's other feuds. My lone frustration was this was another kick the can down the road segment, but it does feel like a blow up is happening sooner than later. I don't give a shit about the rest of the family. They're literally worthless. I do care about those two guys, and the dynamics at play here are largely working. I'd like to find a way to hear from them directly and not have Callis do everything, but overall, I did find this to be a success. On Collision, Olympia beat Taya Valkyrie in 2 minutes after another god-awful MXM TV segment. This happened for no reason. It was terrible. Olympia later said that she wanted the match so she could get one with Mercedes Moné to reclaim the CMLL title for the promotion. After commercial, that title match was announced for next week. It would be hysterical if it wasn't so insulting and consistently ridiculous and poor wrestling booking. Beat a jobber, debut on a brand, get a title match. If she had done something in CMLL to deserve it, we didn't see it and we weren't told about it. On Dynamite, Chris Statlander basically was dressed normal, not in her weird alien shit all of a sudden. She said that she would watch Moné's match against Olympia and she would be around all night if Mercedes wanted to find her. They later brawled backstage and out to the stage before Athena saved her partner once they got in the ring. Harley Cameron, Willow Nightingale, their first round opponents, saved. It was fine. Athena, to me, came across like the bigger star out of the 5 here, the way she carried herself. On Collision, Thekla beat Mina Shirakawa. This was developed on the prior Dynamite, step in the right direction. Thekla won with a great headlock submission using her powerful legs. Unfortunately, it was the second straight match on Collision that needed to end with heel group interference. Did Shirakawa actually need to be protected here from Thekla? She really did not. TJ on Collision got a backstage promo taking credit for building the division the last 5 years. If they had built the tag team division, these titles would have existed years ago. Nixon Newell, the former Tegan Knox, and I think her name's Miranda Alizé, they didn't get a bottom third graphic, so how could you know who they were? They said they were going to, take a guess, join the promotion where the best wrestle.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Glad to see Nixon get another significant opportunity, but if I'm being honest, every clip I've seen of her since leaving WWE, it's shown that she's still moving slow as molasses given her knee problems. Perhaps that issue can be hidden in a tag team format. My understanding is that her partner is her real-life girlfriend, which is really cool. So fingers crossed this works out for her, because at one point, she had a super bright future. On Dynamite, Sisters of Sin beat Jamie Hayter and Queen Aminata in the first tournament match. There were 5 bouts on the show, and despite this tournament being one that's ongoing, the women only got 1 spot. At least it went 10 minutes, including a commercial, obviously. I could be wrong. I don't believe the match was actually promoted for Dynamite. It just happened. It was the match they went with. Thekla took out Hayter ringside with a DDT, which was completely botched on commentary by Excalibur. The heels then beat Aminata with a tandem finisher, an elevated Uranagi that simply did not work at all. The right side won. Continuing Thekla Hayter was the right decision. It was just the finisher that sucked. Extremely clunky. After the match, we learned Penelope Ford tore her UCL, which puts her out indefinitely. Megan Bain offered to team up with anyone in the building who wanted to make history. So Marina Shafir came in and stood face to face with her. Then Mox walked between them, trying to put them over. Oh my God, look at these two. Something like that. They fist bumped. I suppose it makes sense. Shit happens. They had to make a switch. Marina is not doing anything because she never wrestles, so you might as well let her wrestle. On Collision, Ace Austin beat Brian Keith in a 12-minute match that went far too long. This was badly built last week, but it was built nonetheless. And lastly, on Collision, there was an Outrunners Dalton Castle backstage segment interrupted by the Acclaimed arguing, which was not even close to believable. The Faces did a fourth wall breaking thing that basically showed Outrunners were putting on their characters the entire time, which didn't make a shred of sense why you would show this to the audience unless they're going to do some type of storyline with it, which I just simply doubt. So I did find Dynamite this week to be more enjoyable than the last few. And overall, as I mentioned, having storyline relevance to some of these matches, you hear it in my voice and the way I broke the show down. I'm able to be less critical of it because it's not ridiculous, right? If you create reasons for matches, maybe they're not good matches, maybe they're still bottom of the card, but at least we understand why they're on the screen, and we're hoping that it builds to something that is actually a little bit interesting. There's a lot going on in AEW right now. They're now trying to build, I was going to say 2 blood and guts matches, but 1, and maybe they get back to another. They're doing the women's tag team tournament. I will give them a lot of credit, actually, for building Full Gear relatively early. I mean, the 2 main title matches are set. The tag team title match is set. So they got like 3 or 4 bouts on that card that are ready to go, and they're trying to sell tickets to that show. I think they're trying to get like 8,000-9,000, which would be really good, for the most part, I would say. But again, top to bottom, when you look at AEW, there's just some of those logic gaps and some of those issues and things that, just like I said with NXT, if you took a little extra time, if you took a breath, if you get the script and what you're going to do on the show, and you take 4 hours, you put it aside, you come back and you read it top to bottom and you think about it logically. There's so many little things that if you just tweaked this, changed that, had this person do it instead of that person, all of a sudden, you're like, wow, that's a really cohesive, solid show. Instead, we're able to poke holes in it because the holes are obvious. Because we do it for WWE, we do it for NXT, and of course, we do it for AEW. Now, this would, of course, normally wrap up the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, but we do still have 2 special topics to cover. The first being a special match at Marigold in Japan between Io Sky and longtime friend and mentee, Mayu Iwatani. This main evented the show, and the pageantry was fully on point. It was interesting how much more polished visually Io looked compared to Mayu. There was some BS made of this match, with people noting how Io wrestled quicker and with more intensity because she was not hamstrung by WWE style. I watched this without taking notes, and what was clear to me is that she was wrestling someone much closer to her size, who was trained to have a similar skill set in a similar discipline. Outside of a couple spots or sequences, there was nothing you saw here that would not happen in a WWE match with Asuka or Kairi Sane, or even someone like Roxanne Perez. Joshi wrestling being a different pace does not necessarily mean it's better or that Io is being held back in WWE. In fact, it's a credit to her as a performer that she can be one of the most over women in what's effectively 2 different disciplines. Ironically, the move of the match was Iwatani doing an inverted flying poison rana into a trap cover, which was incredible. Io won, of course. She came off like an absolute megastar. My grade for this was an A. I was right between 4.25 and 4.5 stars. It lacked for me the intensity necessary to be higher than that. Not a match of the year contender, but I saw others believe it should be. And I guess if you really love Joshi wrestling, then it could have been. But nevertheless, overall, I found it super entertaining. It was great that Io got to wrestle Mayu, and she did flash the Joshi skill that she has that I don't want to say gets hidden on WWE TV because it doesn't, but it certainly gets lessened a bit because the style is different and because she fights generally much larger opponents and wrestles alongside much larger teammates like Rhea Ripley, as an example. And now the main event of today's show. The Silver King had an opportunity last week to sit down one-on-one with Natty Neidhart ahead of the release of her new book, Last Heart Beating, From the Dungeon to WWE. You'll hear details about where to get the book, of course, during the interview itself. And then on the back end, we will, review the interview a little bit, discuss some of the points that Natty brought up, and then conclude the show. If you wish to watch instead of listen to this interview, you can find it on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Thanks so much to all of you for listening to today's show. And now, Natty Neidhart. Thrilled to welcome multi-time champion, the first ever female Luthez Award winner, future WWE Hall of Famer, and now author, Natty Neidhart, to the show for the first time. Natty is here promoting her first book, The Last Heart Beating, covering her life and most of her career, available today wherever you purchase physical or digital media. Thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on the book, Natty. This is not an easy endeavor. It was obvious from reading it how much of your heart, no pun intended, and soul that you poured into this.
I'm so happy that you read it. People that have read the book, I instantly like, let's talk.
Right.
Because it just means so much to me. When somebody reads my book, or when you like, it's a commitment. You're giving your time. And honestly, the most valuable thing that any of us can give each other is time.
Yep.
It is to me, that's the most valuable thing that we can give. So this book was it was the most therapeutic experience of my life. And it's something that I just feel so proud of. I feel like every high and low in my life has been so worth it to be able to tell this story in the book. Because there's a very powerful story. It's not just, it's the book is more about my relationships than it's even about wrestling. Wrestling is just sort of the backdrop.
Right.
The people in my life, they're the ones that have shaped my life. More than a wrestling match, more than a title or anything like that. It's the people in my life that have taught me so much, and like through good, bad, and everything in between. Like that's the heart of the book.
Yeah. It's so clear that through every person that you mention, every tale that you tell, you're trying to do them justice and provide them respect while simultaneously sharing, this is how I actually felt. And this is how it impacted my life. And obviously, one of those, and really the most prominent, was, of course, your father, who you were able to put down on paper, the way he positively affected your life in numerous ways, but also negatively to a degree, the trials and tribulations, I really should say, that you guys went through. So I kind of had a two-part question when it came to him, because you reveal for the first time that your dad was diagnosed with CTE after his death. Did you allow yourself to forgive him for any resentment you were hanging on to? And the way you talk with such a centered mind, you mentioned therapeutic. Did you go to therapy and work some of this out?
Well, I did. I did go. I think therapy is really important, and I just am not. Again, I'm not trying to tell people what to do, but like talking about it, working through it. It's just like everybody. I think it's just important. When I'm feeling good, I go to therapy. When I feel bad, I go to therapy. It's in. And so for me, I said this to my husband the other day. I said somebody had asked me why I chose to talk about my dad's health struggles. I felt like it was necessary. Two reasons. One, because it was about forgiveness. Because once I started realizing what my dad was going through, my dad was dealing with a traumatic brain injury since his teenage years. So I realized that the I could let so much go, and I could really forgive my dad for things that happened when we were growing up, because then I was able to understand that he had a situation that he was dealing with that wasn't necessarily in his control, that he was struggling, and no one knew. Like my whole childhood, teen years, and adult life, I never knew what was going on. I just kept thinking that my dad, he just couldn't get it together, and he just couldn't push through, and maybe he didn't love us. Maybe once I found out that, hey, he was going through something that wasn't in his control, it it was such a huge relief for me. And that's like, for me, like it just answered so many questions. And I said to TJ, I said, I want people to understand early on in the book that this is what he was going through, so that they don't read the entire book and it shapes their perspective of him in a negative way. I really think my dad was doing the best that he could with what he was capable of. But those very early years for my dad was a pro athlete before he ever got to WWE. Started playing football when he was 11, and was a professional. My dad was number one shot putter in the United States when he was 18 years old. He was ranked number 5 in the world. But, playing football as a teenager with no helmet, through getting his head hit over and over and over again, it would go on to affect him for the rest of his life. And it affected me, my sisters, and my mom, and our whole family for the rest of my life. So it was a hard thing to write about. I'm going to be honest with you, Adam, it's a hard thing for me to talk about, but it's also something that's a very, very big part of my story. And it could be a lifeline for someone else's story.
Yeah, well, that's the whole book. This is a really hard thing for me to talk about, but I'm going to do it anyway. And you mentioned TJ, of course, your husband, TJ Wilson, which that story of how he actually became your husband, I loved, and like why it happened and all of that. But you guys had a real, of course, intricate, long-lasting relationship before that even happened, which was even more so than I think a lot of us who just watch you on screen knew. We knew that you were together for a while, but I don't think we knew how long you actually knew each other and how deep it went.
Yes.
When you describe his injury, which that's one of the moments where you're reading a book. It's like, I should go to sleep. no, wait, I need to read 3 more chapters because
You can't put it down.
and I hate that it was such a negative, of course, moment that I had to keep reading. But his injury was crushing. How it happened, the aftermath, which I never would have guessed. The frightening explanation you got that it was nearly an internal decapitation. It's one of the wildest things I've ever heard. Is it crazy to say that TJ was somehow just as upset at feeling like he lost wrestling as he was for his health and being injured?
I think that was just those were the hardest chapters for me to write about, but I just was like, again, I felt the story was so powerful, and I know so many people that are going through, not just in people that I work with, but people outside of WWE that have gone through very traumatic experiences that when they read the book and they specifically read those chapters, there's a woman that I'm very close friends with that she was in the army and she had a very serious injury in the army and lost one of her limbs. And once she couldn't, do the job the way that she used to be like able to do it, she lost her identity. And she talked to me about, she's like, I read the book and I got to those chapters and she goes, I was suicidal after I got hurt in the army. Like I didn't know who I was. I didn't know where I fit into the world. And that's a big part of why I wrote about it, because when TJ got injured and he wasn't able to wrestle anymore, he didn't know who he was. He would look at himself in the mirror and go, I don't know who I am anymore. All I've ever loved was wrestling since he was a little boy. And that's all he ever wanted to do. Even if he never made it, he just always loved wrestling. And watching him lose that, it was like a really, it was a big grieving process for us. And so people, again, in or out of WWE, people that go through trauma, death, grief, just losing something that means everything to them, it's not linear and there's no playbook on how to handle it. So it was important for me to share, like, hey, this is how we dealt with it. And it was a really trying time. But the good news is that we made it out on the other side. And not only did we survive it, but we are thriving from it. And so sometimes, and I said this the other day in an interview, I don't wish an injury on anyone, especially my husband, but I do think that TJ's injury was a blessing in disguise because it led him to the greatest point in his life, which is the work that he's doing right now in WWE. Yeah. And so, it was a situation that was hard for all of us. It was hard for TJ. It was hard for me. It was hard for the company. It was hard for Samoa Joe. It was just a really bad time. Yeah. But we all made it out on the other side. And that's the thing about life, is that you can have a pity party, but you got to get over it and work through it. And we are so much stronger today because of it. But it was a really hard time, and it was a hard chapter to write about. Those 2 chapters were very challenging.
I loved how steadfast he was as well. Like, this is what it's going to take for me to move on from this. And until I get that, I'm not going to. And then he got it. And yeah, I just thought that was so important that you.
And it honestly shows you the honor of sometimes we make mistakes. And the biggest thing for me, whenever I make a mistake, even if it's hard, the biggest thing sometimes when you make a mistake is just to say, I'm sorry. Yep. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I've learned that from myself in my personal relationships. There's been things that I've made mistakes on, many, many things. And that's a big lesson in the book, is like, I think my whole life I went wanting to hear my dad say those words. And then I realized after he passed away that he wasn't able to, and so it allowed me to forgive him and then really, truly honor his life the way that I needed to. Sure. But people are human, and I love being able to share the human side of everything in the book.
Something you talked about extensively as well was actually quite similar to something I read in Becky Lynch's book about the beauty and fitness standards of WWE, along with your own personal expectations, particularly back when you were starting, how they affected your personal perception, your mental health, even resulted in an eating disorder, which unfortunately is not uncommon. I think you said there was one point you lost like 30 pounds in 3 months, which for someone your size is kind of insane if you really think about it. So what I'm kind of curious about is, how difficult was it to balance, let's say, the legitimate asks being presentable for TV, because you guys are in front of a camera, with the unfair desires and expectations that were put on you?
I think it's showbiz, and I want to clarify that, because I think in sports and in entertainment, and of course WWE, we're sports and entertainment, but I don't want to go on in a tangent about eating disorders, but I I had an eating disorder that started when I was 16.
Mm.
So it was relatively after my uncle Owen passed away. And so it was just, I didn't even realize I didn't realize what was happening. I was trying to grasp for control in my life.
Right.
So through my teen years, I had struggled with an eating disorder where I went from like 165 pounds down to like 110 pounds. And I realize now, through therapy that it was all about control because during that time, after Owen passed away, it was a very chaotic time for our family. And so I was, as a teenager, trying to grasp for control. Fast forward to trying to get hired by WWE. At the end of the day, we are entertainment.
Mhm.
And so whether you're trying to get hired for a movie part or you're trying to, you think about like sports in general, like there's a aesthetic that, I think the person that probably put the most pressure on myself for body image was me.
Mhm.
But I, again, had it in my head that you got to be perfect, so I talked about this earlier, but like my whole life, I was just striving for perfection everywhere in school and at home with my parents, with my family, as a teenager. And then a lot of it was about control. When I was trying to get to WWE, I was trying to be perfect. I was like, they want this and they want this and and a lot of that came from me in my own, like, I have to be all of these things when at the end of the day, especially now, almost 2 decades in, I'm realizing, like, and I've heard Rhea Ripley say this, when she was just kind of allowed to be herself is when she started to do her best work. And so I think if anyone put the most pressure on me, it was probably me. But yeah, I mean, in WWE, there's different phases. We've seen so many different eras. We've seen the Attitude Era, we've seen the Divas Era, we've seen the Women's Revolution. Where we've seen so many different phases, and I always just felt that I had to be perfect. And of course, they were when I was trying to get hired, WWE, they were looking for certain things,
Right.
and I didn't fit the mold of that, but I had to push and fight and scratch and claw to get to where I am. That defined me and made me the person that I am today because I stopped at nothing
Mhm.
to get to where I am. I would have worked for free in WWE to just get the chance to chase my dreams. And so I'm proud of that. Like, I'm so proud that I was able to just, like, there was doors that were slammed in my face and I kept kicking down those doors. And that's really how I got to where I'm at today, is just by just not taking no for an answer and fighting for everything I have.
When it comes to Vince McMahon in the workplace, obviously head honcho of WWE for such a long time, a lot of the stories you tell in your book kind of just confirm all of the things that we've heard about him as the lead of creative and the manager
Yeah,
of
he
all the
was
talent
very in charge.
for such a long time. So it's a common question these days to ask talent, how backstage and creative has shifted now under Paul Levesque. But you, more than anyone, has been around long enough to truly see that shift
Yeah.
from the most extreme to whatever it is now. What would you say are the greatest changes, maybe not just in general, but also for the women specifically?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. I loved working with Vince. I learned so much working from Vince. Like, my family's had a very long relationship with Vince, and so even the last chapter of my book, when my dad passed away, Vince was the very first person I called.
Mhm.
And Vince, and this is worth mentioning because I want to highlight some positives. When my dad passed away, I called Vince at 6 o'clock in the morning because that night I was supposed to wrestle Alexa Bliss on Raw. And Vince picked up on the first ring because he's that kind of hands-on boss that I called his phone. And I would never, I think he had texted me on my birthday. And so I had his number and I thought, I was like, I've got to tell Vince, I can't come to work. I got to catch a flight home. Got to go home to, see my dad. And he picked up on the first ring, said, send me every single picture you have of your dad. Just send it to me. I want to make a video package for him tonight on Raw. Vince put together the most beautiful video package you could imagine. He was there for me in those, like, my darkest hours. And so I worked with Vince for 15 years. He taught me probably the most of anybody in professional wrestling, especially about work ethic, because I don't think I've ever met anybody in the industry that worked harder than him. But I will say that now, where we're at in WWE, it is really cool to work with Triple H. The thing I love about working with Hunter and working for Hunter is that Hunter was also a wrestler. So it has a different perspective on the industry than Vince did because, Vince would take part in, like, I remember slapping Vince at WrestleMania and doing, like, Vince had been a part of storylines and stuff, but Hunter was a wrestler. So Hunter understands the ups and the downs and the highs and the lows of like you're struggling and you're scratching and clawing, just trying to like pitch a storyline. And so I think that that's the thing I love about working with Hunter is that he's very collaborative and he also knows what it's like to compete in the ring and really do it at the highest level. And I do think that he's a master storyteller. I think that he really likes to take his time and tell stories. And I said to my husband the other day, I was like, I can appreciate that Hunter wants to be very careful and very thoughtful with like just how what I'm doing in my career in WWE because back 3 years ago or 4 years ago when Hunter wasn't in charge, I would work a lot more, but I wasn't always part of things that were meaningful. I would be on TV just in random matches, doing random things that just didn't matter or mean anything. I feel like now, especially being able to build this new character outside of WWE, I feel like I've just kind of hit a different stride where I'm working towards something really meaningful in this new character and doing it with the blessing of WWE.
So that's actually what I wanted to ask you about. And I know we're coming up on time, but I'll do two real quick questions here. So low-key legend, Natty Neidhart, absolutely love what we're seeing, obviously, especially on the independents, Bloodsport, NWA, etc. Then we get you in AAA, which is very cool. And you're looking like the low-key legend Natty, and you have the braids and the gear and the whole 9 yards, but you're coming out as Natalya. Then on Raw, you're Natalya, but with the little cowboy hat and the regular entrance. So why is it so jagged across the three different types of places that you wrestle? And are we gonna get to see, do you believe, Natty Neidhart, low-key legend, on Raw on the main roster?
Great question. Well, she's the way I look at it is, and a huge inspiration for me with this character. One, the book. When I was writing the book, I was able to really go, wow, this is who I needed to be. This is who I want to be. Why not just do it? Just take a chance on it. When I'm working, everything in life, as you know, probably from your own experiences, everything in life is situational.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big person on like, it's not about survival of the fittest. It's about who can adapt to the places that they are. When I do GCW, when I did Bloodsport, you will see the most edgy version of Natty, where it's just as raw and real as it gets. And then if I did NWA, you see her being very edgy as well. The low-key legend. I love, Billy Corgan's a good friend of mine, but we sold out the ECW arena and like I had so much fun just letting loose and just being that character. And then of course I worked for Booker T for Reality of Wrestling. You saw the low-key legend. I could really, again, unleash. It's it's just wherever I'm at in WWE. We have not introduced the low-key legend yet. AAA, we have seen the low-key legend. She has
half of it. Yeah.
Yes, we've seen it, but like we're building, and a big goal of mine. I think about it every day. I think about bringing Natty to WWE, and I do believe that we're going to get there. And I can't give away too many spoilers, but I definitely think that the best work of my career is about to come.
I'll get you out of here on this because I know we're over time. There's been women's revolution in WWE, evolution as well. I'm wondering if you believe true equality is achievable when it comes to women's wrestling being on par with the men, half the TV time, half the PLE matches. Because to me, from a talent standpoint, top of the division to the bottom, especially when you factor in the women in NXT that are coming up, I think WWE is closer than it's ever been before.
Right.
The in-ring ability, the promos, all the parts of the equation to make that possible. Do you think it's possible? Do you think that will happen?
Yeah, I do. I think, and the thing is, and I believe this wholeheartedly, the one thing I love with Hunter is that he wants the best stories on the show. So if there's a PLE, for example, and the girls at that moment have the best stories, you'll see the girls get more of the moments or more of the matches.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not unusual for us to have a PLE where it's like, hey, half the card's girl, female or the girls are dominating because they just at that moment have stronger stories. It's not about like, we got to get a girls match on, or like Hunter has said before, like that was good for a girl. He doesn't like when people say that was good for a girls match. He wants people to watch the show, whether it's a girls match or a guys match, and go, wow, that was a great match. And so I saw that very early on with him when I was asked to do the very first NXT takeover. And he asked me to work with Charlotte Flair. And I really saw that like he gave us a platform to do to showcase all that we wanted to be, all that I had never gotten to do before. I got to do it at that first takeover in 2014. And again, I've told this story before, but it's worth mentioning it, that like, it was the first time in my career where I walked up to my boss and I said, how much time do we have?
Mhm.
And he said, you know what? Don't even worry about it. Just tell the story you want to tell. I think Hunter knew that I was starving. And so he didn't really give me a time limit for my match. And so I had never experienced that from anyone before, where he was just like, tell the story that you want to tell and just do it. So I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that with the women getting more moments. And, I mean, it's very cool. The company is in a very cool place right now where we have the most eyes on us, through all these different, streaming, deals that we have, and just the reach that more people can watch us now than ever before, especially with Netflix, where Netflix is seen in 80% of the world. We didn't ever have that before. So I think it's just about quality of the stories, quality of the performers. And, I think the girls were just so competitive. We're hungry, we're competitive, and we want to be the best.
Yeah. You can definitely see it. Natty, thank you so much for your time and patience, going a little bit over the time here. It's
That's okay.
absolutely a pleasure meeting you. Last Heart Beating, like I said, you can get it wherever you purchase physical or digital media. We'll see Natty, I'm sure, on WWE, AAA TV, and maybe the independent near you as well. Thank you so much, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you.
Once again, appreciate Natty for joining us here on the show. A lot of that interview, the best way I can kind of put that over is to explain that it was almost portions of her book reiterated in the interview. And I say that both positively and with a very small tinge of criticism. Positively from the standpoint that she did an incredible job selling her book. The small criticism is I was trying to get her to expand beyond the book, and given the short time frame of the interview, I wasn't necessarily able to ask the follow-up questions that I would have for some of the answers that she gave. But regardless, I do tell all of you that this was an extremely intriguing read. Now, this is the second memoir that we've read and covered here on the show. The first, of course, being Becky Lynch's book prior to WrestleMania in 2024. And both of them were relatively similar, even though their stories are completely different. Both had to deal with family dynamics, the way they grew up, passion about the business, trying to get to WWE, but also overcoming a variety of struggles. Becky's had more to do with her lack of confidence and some individual issues that she had to overcome throughout her life. Whereas Natty, she wasn't ever really lacking confidence. She just didn't necessarily have the buy-in from other people that she hoped to have. And it took her a while. Initially, she didn't have the confidence because basically her family told her that it's the men who wrestle and the women support them, right? But once she did that, which was years and years and years ago, it was really about proving that she belonged in WWE and trying to figure out how she could make it. But really the parts of the book that stood out, and it's not to say that reading about her journey to WWE didn't stand out. It did. We know a lot of those stories. We understand a lot of the characters. I mentioned in the way she describes Vince McMahon. It's not revelatory in any way because we know what Vince McMahon is like as a boss because we've read about it so many times. What was truly revealing in this memoir was a ton of information about her father, Jim the Anvil Neidhart, what he dealt with both earlier in his life and then certainly at the end of his life, and the entire situation surrounding TJ Wilson breaking his neck in the match with Samoa Joe, how Cesaro, Claudio Castagnoli kind of helped him through that, and why TJ was gone from WWE for so long beyond the fact that he couldn't obviously get in a ring. That to me was super compelling. She really opened up significantly about those struggles and major obstacles she had to overcome in her life. And it really was a super fast read from start to finish. So I highly recommend the book. Like I said, interview with Natty. I'm so grateful for her joining the show. It was just very clear to me as someone who's done a ton of these interviews. She was running through the car wash and was giving a lot of the same answers where Perhaps she was not answering the questions as directly as I would have liked, but if I do have an opportunity to interview her in the future, now we have a base level conversation where we can then hopefully expand on some of those topics and get into the specificity of some of the things I wanted to know. I loved her answer at the end, of course, about the women's division in WWE and what can happen with that going forward. So I appreciate all of you who watched the interview on YouTube at Getting Overcast, and certainly all of you who just listened to it right now for the first time. Again, thanks to WWE, the book company, Natty herself, for joining us. It was great to speak with her for the first time, and we hope to have many of these one-on-ones here in the future at Getting Over as we have in the past. I'll tell you, breaking the fourth wall a little bit, I just submitted a list of 4 names to WWE, hoping to get really all 4 of them, but hopefully at least 1 or 2 of them on the show before year's end. A couple of them are people who I've been wanting to talk to for a long time. So fingers crossed that happens. We only have 2 months left in 2025, but really my goal is to speak with them before the year is out. Thank you all so much for listening to this edition, of course, of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. As we conclude the show, allow the Silver King to remind you to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter and Blue Sky. You get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, all of that good stuff. On YouTube, when you subscribe over there, you can get full-length audio episodes and full-length video interviews like the one we just held with Natty Neidhart. Please don't forget, here at Getting Over,
It's all about Defy.
so head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. And lastly, please remember,
I happen to love the number 5.
hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. We're a free show. We're an ad-free show. We would greatly appreciate your financial support. All right, folks, that wraps it all up. Your full episode, 90 minutes-ish of performance-enhancing audio delivered to your ear holes. We will be back on Saturday with your WWE Saturday Night's Main Event instant analysis. Then back next week, Tuesday, talking WWE. Thursday, again, talking NXT and AEW. It is officially time for the Silver King to sign off and leave you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.